Cargill has been a long supporter of free trade agreements, and I'm going to kind of keep with Jaime's three-pronged approach. Since TPP's inception, we've really supported three core principles that we think are important to ensuring TPP is a meaningful agreement. The first principle is TPP must include the right subset of Pacific economies spanning Asia, Latin America, North America. The second principle is TPP must be a comprehensive undertaking, meaning that it should include all products in all sectors. The third principle is TPP must address long-standing trade and investment barriers with new solutions. And based on a lot of the things that you've heard this morning, Cargill believes that TPP actually accomplishes and delivers on all three of those principles. I'll start with the first point, really looking at the subset of Pacific economies included in this agreement. We heard the numbers earlier from Ambassador Vetter. TPP economies constitute 40% of global GDP. 3 out of our largest 4 trading partners are included in this agreement. And specifically looking at food and agriculture, 40% of U.S. food and agriculture exports are actually destined for TPP markets. That's important to us because we believe once TPP is implemented, it will allow us to build upon our existing trade flows. To the second point, really looking at the comprehensive undertaking. Ambassador Vetter also mentioned this earlier, TPP covers all agricultural products and even the most sensitive ones, which we believe was incredibly critical to market access gains that we actually achieved with TPP. Let's take Japan, for example. Japan is the #1 destination market for U.S. beef exports, even despite the fact that we're facing a 38.5% tariff in Japan. Now, looking at 2016, not only do we face a 38.5% tariff, but we're also facing stiffer competition. As mentioned, Japan and Australia signed a free trade agreement, which essentially put U.S. beef exports at a disadvantage going into Japan. So when you talk about what's at stake, why is this important? I see my friend from National Cattlemen Association. In January alone of this year, the U.S. beef exports lost $100 million in sales in Japan. And so when we look at really what TPP does, it's not only opening up new market access opportunities, but if we don't pass it, we run the risk of losing existing market shares. This speaks to the broader point of why we think it's so important. We know that TPP includes a number of our key critical export countries, and really looking at just new solutions as we look at trade and investment barriers. So talking about SBS provisions, Jaime touched on that. We're particularly pleased with that chapter, and looking at the consultation technical cooperations, we look at that as a rapid response mechanism. So when we look at shipping perishable goods overseas, we believe it's important to resolve SBS issues in an expedited manner. And with the new mechanisms included, we think that we're able to potentially resolve these issues in a matter of days and months instead of years under the current WTO SBS dispute settlement. So in conclusion, Cargill supports this agreement. We think it allows us to access new markets, and we think that it's good not only for Cargill, but for farmers, for our suppliers, and ultimately for consumers around the world. Thank you very much.